So, Parker, I think that's a really good kind of way to, at least for the moment, kind of tie up this conversation. We have about 30 minutes left in the show, and we have one more topic we really wanted to get to that I'm curious to kind of pose to the group. So I'll ask you this question. Maybe Russell, we haven't heard from you a little bit. If you want to start on this question. The question is, in a Bitcoin world, let's say like the hyper Bitcoinization narrative succeeds. What will a Bitcoin financial company look like?
Interesting. In my version of the Bitcoin world, or just like, because I definitely can't tell the future, but in my version, and this is based on a lot of the points I think Jeremy said, because we're seeing it now. And I hate to keep bringing up Ethereum, but I think it's a really good use case. We saw it with Sushi Swap and Uniswap. So if you're not following, it's basically you have open source code, everybody loves it. Somebody says, I'm going to copy it and extract all of the value and give it to the user. And that, in essence, is what we're building right now. We're like, I use Bank of America, right? You know how many times they fuck me? As many times as they can, they'll fuck me, right? As many fees as I can pay, as many like overdraft charges as they can get, that they fuck you. But a decentralized world isn't that. It's, I'm going to use the protocol that loves me, that does the most for me. And I believe that in a Bitcoin decentralized world, that's what we're going to create. We're going to create tools and decentralized platforms that allow people to do what they want to do without needing a third party that literally is there to take their money away, that is literally there to get in the way of them doing things and to prevent them from, easily and successfully doing transactions between two human beings. Like you and I should be able to exchange value just like that. Why would we need anyone else? You have a phone, I have a phone, you have a computer, I have a computer. Why does the bank need to be involved? Well, they needed to, for the last few centuries, because we were pretty stupid. We are still monkeys, but now we've literally automated it. We're turning it into code. And so I believe that it is a smart contract world. And whether it's on Bitcoin, I couldn't tell you. I hope it's on Bitcoin. And I think that these, wonderful people, everybody on this call is doing their best to make it happen on Bitcoin. And I'm excited for the day when it comes where anyone on this call can transact without any third party in a trusted way and do anything that the old financial world has given, but without the need of that old world, and purely with magical internet money that we all agree on.
So that's a good answer. And Parker, I want to move this over to you. There's definitely going to be, a cornucopia of decentralized financial companies, maybe. But what would even like a centralized financial company look like in a hyper Bitcoinized world?
Yeah, well, I'm not saying this in a pejorative way, but I think that it will look like River, and I think that River is going to kind of expand to offer non-custodial solutions as well. But I think that it will look very similar. Hopefully, I think each institution will be smaller. I think the natural consequence of having a fixed money supply is that the money just continues to decentralize and decentralize and decentralize. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean necessarily that 100% of all individuals are holding Bitcoin, but it means that like too big to fail is gone. You make mistakes, whether you're securing Bitcoin with your own keys or you're using a company like River or you're using a company like BitCo. If you make a mistake, you own it and everybody else remains unaffected. Now, there's a reality that if enough people screw it up, then the whole thing doesn't become viable. So that's only to an extent, but I really think that, a centralized financial institution in the future looks in terms of services, it will look different, because I think that the world, and CK mentioned this at the onset, I do think that as a consequence of Bitcoin, we will definancialize a lot. Like, so many people, they get their money and then they immediately put it at risk. That's how they've been trained to operate because money is today programmed to lose its value. It's like, what if you reverse that equation? What if you say, oh, actually, rather than lose 2%, it's going to increase by some percentage. Not, if we're talking about post-cyber Bitcoinization, it's not going to be, promises of 10x returns. It's going to be just marginally increasing in value. But that small difference of money constantly losing its value versus marginally increasing in value will stop this racket of the second that you take money that you make money, you immediately put it at risk. So I think there's still going to be stocks, there's still going to be bonds, there's still going to be stock exchanges. They're just probably going to be a lot smaller. So the financial institutions, not only are they going to be there's probably going to be more of them. Like if you look at the trend over the last 50, 60 years, it's the banking sector has grown and the number of banks has shrunk. I think what we'll see in Bitcoin is the banking sector will shrink and there will be more companies helping individuals facilitate their Bitcoin needs.
Wonderfully said.
So, I mean, just to kind of jump in too is like, I really love Parker's analogy of thinking of Bitcoins as just keys, and that's all the Bitcoin blockchain recognizes. So it's like a really good framework of like thinking about Bitcoin. And like, we don't know what the UX around handling those keys is going to look like. And, hopefully some of these upgrades do come because they'll enable like things like sharing UTXOs and like opening lightning channels within UTXOs, like within the same UTXO. Like the way that we're going to scale Bitcoin is like kind of beyond like our imagination of like even moving UTXOs around. So like there's a lot of this that we're not seeing. And that's why I really like Parker's analogy of like, think of this as keys, is like, how are keys going to scale? Like how are people going to be using keys in the future? Like it's beyond our wildest dreams. And our CEO of Bitcoin Magazine often says like the real adventure happens after hyper Bitcoinization. That's why I love this subject, is because like a lot of times we talk about like, how is Bitcoin going to take over the world? But like, how is the world getting on a good value measuring system? Like, how's that going to change society? Like, how's that going to change how everything else works? And I love this idea. And I'm really excited to like dig into like, what does that mean for society to have something like this? And maybe that can kind of tease into like finance as well.
Because it sparked when Parker said it. When you look at inflation, and I always use the analogy of the McDonald's hamburger. It's like when hamburgers and fast food first came out, it was like 20 cents to get a hamburger. And now, they're getting rid of the dollar menu because they're pumping so many dollars into the economy. But in a Bitcoin denominated world, it's the opposite. It's like it starts out at 100 Satoshis and then 10 years later, it's 50 Satoshis for the same thing, because so many improvements happen in technology that make it cheaper for us to do it, or automation. And so it's a really interesting way to think about it. Parker, thank you for that wonderful, wonderful future. That idea is great.
Yeah, I think to add on to that, I think it asks an interesting question, which is like, if the future of finance or in a Bitcoin world, if we have a bunch of different kind of smaller, I guess, centralized crypto banks that are enabling the future to happen, a big question I think is like, what do those actually look like? Are we going to have a situation where we're following the Bitcoin standard, and we have these crypto banks that have this, these Bitcoin in reserves, and maybe even have countries that are printing, their own currency based on this Bitcoin reserve. And the question is, are people able to remove their money easily from those crypto banks, or from those financial institutions? And if they're not, then that actually creates a big lock-in. If we end up in a world where that does happen. On the flip side, we could have a different type of world where it's more like kind of the direction the river is going in, with providing lightning services, where you have all these different companies that are providing different services that allow for people to have their own I guess self-sovereign tools for Bitcoin, whether they're running a watchtower, or whether they're providing an Oracle service that allows for someone to do a specific thing. But I think that's a big question, is what is the cost to exit whatever system people are in a Bitcoin like financial company?
So I guess I'm the last to answer here on this one.